Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Mark Andrew Holacek, Ukrainian-American historian and philosopher. Taught philosophy for the most part for 33 years before retirement. I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Eye on Ukraine. And today I'd like to talk about the 8 telephone conversations, at least 8 that we know of, between Vladimir Putin and President of the United States, Donald Trump. It's always been strange to me that they would have these telephone conversations in private, that the contents of these conversations would not be made known to the American public or to anybody except through chosen representative of each nation. And so I want to talk about, at the end of this brief discussion, I'll sort of summarize my thoughts and give you a bird's eye view of the number of the conversations, the very minutes that over which they occurred. And let's talk about, Bob Woodward, in his recent book on Donald Trump, said that there have been 7 calls between Putin and Trump since 2021, after Trump lost the 2020 election. And, this caused a bit of a stir. Why would someone who lost the presidency be talking to Vladimir Putin? One can surmise, one can easily surmise that perhaps Trump is planning, of course, on making another presidential run. Can his buddy in Russia help him? He was certainly helped in 2016 when mysteriously so much evidence of Hillary Clinton's emails and other correspondence, things like that, were made public through Russian hackers. And can't say for sure that caused this radical upset where Trump beat Hillary Clinton, and Clinton would have been a hawk. Clinton does not like Putin, does not like Russia. And I think it certainly caused Clinton to lose the presidential race. So clearly, the fact that there are 7 calls since 2021 is rather mysterious. Now, what about their conversations? The Wall Street Journal says they're typically friendly. Trump likes to talk about U.S. and Russian relationships, i.e. economic relationships improving, and Putin prates on about grievances and core desires, the root causes of the war, and why nobody loves Russia, that nobody recognized Crimea legitimately belongs to Russia, and the Donbass as well. Putin's ever insisted on, especially of late, of having the Donbass as part of Russia, and he thinks Crimea certainly by right and by tradition, since Russia took Crimea over from the Turks many decades ago, many centuries ago, a few centuries ago. It's by rights Russians, belongs to Russia. Now, on February 12th, they talk for 90 minutes. No one from the European Union was notified in advance that there'd be such a conversation, which is itself somewhat astonishing. Putin just wants a direct conversation with Trump, and they have a conversation. You talk about having a tete-a-tete later on, a face-to-face meeting. And Trump acknowledges if the war is going to end, that Ukraine has to make some certain substantial contributions. He's talking about territorial contributions, concessions, I should say, to Russia, namely freezing the war along its current lines and everything going to Russia, everything that Russia has captured, presumably going to Russia. Ukraine losing roughly 20+% of its territory. On March 8th, they talked for 120 minutes. Yuri Ushakov says, in this regard in particular, the idea was discussed that it'd be necessary to study the possibility of raising the level of representatives of the Ukrainian and Russian sides. That is, those representatives who participate in the mentioned direct negotiations. So if this is the case, the idea here, let's get more people to the table to talk about everything going on so far is, from the history of these conversations, just stall tactics. These are stall tactics by Putin. He has no desire to surcease the war. He has no desire for a temporary ceasefire. He wants to go all in, and he thinks he can take all of Ukraine. He's always thought that. Now, after the meeting, Trump published, of course, on Truth Social that he talked with Putin. The conversation went remarkably well. There's going to be a trilateral meeting between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky. At least that was proposed. Trump proposes a 30-day ceasefire and that there'd be no attacking energy infrastructure. That is the sort of energy infrastructure as it relates to civilians. And then Putin adds at the end, let's get the people, the Russian, great Russians from the National Hockey League and American hockey players together with Russian skaters from the Continental Hockey League of Russia. Let's get them together and we'll play some hockey. May 19th, 2 months later, almost exactly, they have a 120-minute conversation. And Putin talks about how the Russians really love Melania Trump. They discuss the possibility again of meeting in person. Trump writes on Truth Social, just completed my 2-hour call with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. I believe it went very well. Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire, more importantly, and END capitalized to the war. Well, no such thing happened. Surprise, surprise, right? Putin is stringing along Donald Trump again. Less than maybe 2 weeks later, but certainly less than a month, they speak on June 4 for 75 minutes on Ukraine. Putin must respond to Ukraine's attacks on airfields. What Putin is saying here is that, look, we can't stop the war because they're attacking our airfields and we need to defend ourselves. And it's a matter of self-defense at this point. So we can't stop the war. But they do talk about the situation in Iran, and Trump mentions that at all costs, Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. June 14th, they talk for 50 minutes. Guess what day this is? It's DJT's birthday. Happy birthday, you big orange fat fuck. Talk about ending the war. I'm sure this was mostly about flattery and talk about the Middle East and things like that. And don't know too much about what went on. I'm sure a lot of the conversation centered on Putin flattering Donald Trump, saying happy birthday, what a dear friend you are, blah, blah, blah. On July 3, there's a 60-minute conversation. Notice the conversations May 19, 120, then 75, 50, 60. They're not going as long as they used to. Donald Trump, it is the day before the 4th of July. Putin congratulates him. He congratulates the United States on their wonderful declaration. And he says, don't ever forget the contribution that Russia made to U.S. statehood. What contribution is that, Putin? I don't know. Perhaps he's talking about the great patriotic war that because of Russian involvement and the massive losses that Russia took, enabled, right, the United States and all of Europe to defeat the rest of Europe that was in non-German Europe, to defeat Germany and Germany's allies. And all right. Putin talks about that we need to address the root causes of the war. This is something he talks about again and again and again, iterates and reiterates and geminates and whatever else he does. Trump goes home, and this is when he starts to sour a little bit about Putin. He says, I go home, I tell the First Lady, Melania, and I spoke with Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, oh, really? Another city was just hit, right? So Trump is starting to realize that that whatever Putin says about ceasefires and ending the war, he doesn't seem to be serious, because immediately after every single conversation they have, Putin ratchets things up and attacks Ukrainian cities and goes scot-free. But notice every time Putin calls at very important points in Russia's war, in his own agenda, times where he knows Trump might be vulnerable and he might be able to hit Trump up when the war's not going so well. He's trying to convince Trump that he really is his friend. Now, we have the Alaska meeting which was a complete fiasco and which soured Trump on Putin because he thought for sure that there would be surcease of the war. Trump did at least. Nothing happened. Trump walked away angry in some of the pictures. He embraces Putin as his friend, the red carpet treatment, and the whole 9 yards, and then nothing happens after that. You can see a sort of surly look on his face and sort of angry look. Yoshakov says, in this regard, in particular, the idea was discussed that it would be necessary to study the possibility of raising the level of representations and so forth. Again, iterating that point. Putin thanks Trump for his hospitality leadership and refuses to make any concessions whatsoever. Every time they meet with Putin, Trump is assuming that Ukraine is ready to make certain concessions, at least to end the war, if Russia on its side would equally make some effort towards concessions. Putin is just unbending, unrelenting in terms of his demands. He really wants all of Ukraine, as we talked about. Trump publishes a message between following his talks with Putin. He says that preparations for the meeting between Putin and Zelensky have begun. It'll be followed up again with the trilateral meeting with Trump being there himself. Nothing of the sort ever happened. There was no meeting. We know that Putin has no desire whatsoever to meet with Zelensky. And so he's playing very, very neatly. He's playing Trump. October 16, this is 2 months after the 40-minute meeting of the 18th when Trump was angry. There is a 140-minute conversation. And this conversation, as far as I'm concerned, is an account of Putin realizing the war is getting desperate for him, that he needs Trump's help. And he needs to be very subtle in the way, in the manner in which he approaches this in conversations with Trump. Trump says, President Putin congratulated me in the United States on the great accomplishment of peace in the Middle East, sucking up to Trump. Trump is the ultimate peacemaker, something that he said has been dreamed of for centuries. I actually believe that the success of the Middle East will help in our negotiations in attaining an end to the war in Russia-Ukraine, with Russia-Ukraine. Right? He goes on to say, we discussed a lot of things, including Iran. We also talked about the conflict in Ukraine, did not make any progress. I am not happy. So Trump is starting to get irate once again. I'm very disappointed with the conversation with President Putin. I don't think he wants to end the conflict. Duh! But Carolyn Levitt gets a summary, an earful of conversation from the president himself. And she says, as the spokesperson for the administration, it was a very good and productive call. It lasted more than 2 hours, and the president feels like great progress made on his call. Great progress once again. Nothing going on. Now, just a couple of days ago, was it last day, he says, Trump says, I spoke with Putin 2 weeks ago, and he said, we've been trying to end that war for 10 years, but we haven't been able to. Now you have to fix it. I promised at the beginning of the show to give you a screenshot of the 8 telephone conversations that they've had in 2025, so we can have a bird's eye perspective, as it were, and see what that, if anything, tells us. I'll bring that up right now. Now we see the first call is on February 12th, which is 90 minutes, March 18th. Over 1 month later, 120 minutes, 2 hours. 2 months later, another 120-minute call. Then we have a call substantially reduced in time, 75 minutes, hour and a quarter on June 4. 14 days later, we have a 15-minute call. And July 3, just before, prior to the declaration, to the 4th of July, we have a 60-minute call, then a 40-minute call, and on October 16, a 140-minute call. We see the tendency, the general tendency, It's inviolable, but the general tendency that the call's getting shorter as they get more numerous. 40-minute call on August 18th. This was just after the Alaska summit. And Trump expressed some anger, insofar as he could express anger, that things were not going exactly the way he wanted them to go. Wanted to get at least a ceasefire. He wanted to get peace established, cease the war. That wasn't happening. And he expressed disappointment with, even though the formal word is that, was that the meeting was overall quite successful. Trump wasn't all too happy. So didn't last very long, not a very good thing for Putin. Then we get up 16th, which was not too long ago, over 2 hours in length. What that suggests to me is Putin coming to some sort of realization that things aren't going too well for Russia at this point, and he needs the help of his buddy Donald Trump. He made a certain mistake there. So 140 minutes was a substantial amount of time. And Putin has, as a lot of people have said, overplayed his hand and done that rather substantially. He had opportunities with these phone calls and with meetings with Trump to show that he was willing at least to make some effort to end the war. I have argued, of course, he can't do that. He's painted himself in a corner, to use that metaphor. Russian leaders who go to war and do not succeed are, as Denis Davidoff would say, kaput. They don't make it. He fashions himself another Peter the Great, a rather puny-sized Peter the Great. Peter was almost 7 feet tall, and Putin is probably about 5'7" at most. But nonetheless, he sees himself as a great leader. He noted that Peter the Great took him 21 years to run the Great Northern War. And if it takes Putin much time to take over Ukraine, it's still a victory. Victory is a victory. And he's heartened by the fact that not everything goes swimmingly all the time for great leaders. So it took 21 years for Peter the Great to establish himself as the Great, Magnus in Latin. And I think not Trump, but Putin still sees himself in some sense that that's still a possibility, though a remote one. Now, end with noting that Putin is easily recognized by almost all the sane leaders of European nations as a complete amoralist, complete asshole. Not just an autocrat, but a totalitarian. He wants not just rule of his country, he wants total control. And I think Trump models himself after Putin. And I'm sure that some part of the conversation, and some of those telephone calls at least, would be to talk about how to get control of the press, how to get control of the people, why you should never, something that Putin was always, of which he was always afraid, never let demonstrations gather in the street, suppress them immediately before things go. And if Putin has shown anything, is that you can get complete control, you can rule through fear. But the problem with totalitarianists, problem with autocrats, they always overplay their hand. When things start going well, it's a matter of wanting. If I want control, I want this and that. And Putin is someone who certainly wants power and control, and he wants things. The problem with totalitarians is that they always overplay their hand. That's the nature of being a totalitarian. If I get many things that I want, I'm going to try to get more. And so at some point, it's not what you get, it's the process of acquiring. It's a process of taking what is legally, lawfully, rightfully not yours and making it your own. Pleonasm. And Putin is great at that. And I think Trump really wants to be that way. And I'll end with just noting that we know Putin's a complete fucking asshole. He has no regard for morality. Uh, the only thing he cares about is his own self. And the people around him are bootlickers, are milksops, and they suck up to him because otherwise, if they do so, they can sort of share in the glory, the limelight, and acquire wealth, at least in the short term. If they don't, they can be kaputted. And I say the same thing is what Trump, like it or not, has tremendous respect for Putin. He sees him as a winner. Um, Putin is what Trump really wants to be, right? Xi of China, same thing. Putin wants control. He wants control of the American people. But as the last couple of days, the elections have shown, he's overplayed his hand. The American people have had enough of tearing down the East Wing of the White House and putting in his ball. Doesn't ask anybody, imposing tariffs without asking anybody, completely ignoring decisions of judicial authorities that go against certain things that he's been doing. And he's pretty much gotten away with it. He's surrounded himself, just like Putin does, and with a bunch of lackeys, with a bunch of people who, it's not a matter of the qualifications. Can you do the job? That's not why Trump hires you. It's not a matter of whether you can do the job. It's a matter of whether you're going to cover Trump's ass. Because Trump is a felon, more than likely a child molester. They don't want the Epstein files to come out. All things considered, he wants people that'll be loyal to him, the same Putin has had. And of course, when you do that, you have to rotate the people because you never know when they'll stab you in the back. You can't have the same people working for you for the most part for many, many years. Always needs to be rotation. And you always, to deflect blame on you when things don't go wrong, like Trump just did in the last couple of days over the elections, where Democrats swept. We had a Palestinian become governor of New York. We had a female, white female, become governor of Virginia. It wasn't his fault, as he said, because I wasn't on the ballot. Had I been on the ballot, people would have voted overwhelmingly for me. Whatever garbage he's trying to say. Anyways, what applies to Putin must be said to Trump. I want Americans especially to think very carefully about this. This guy we have as president is a complete fucking asshole, is a complete immoralist. And, you know, if you voted for him and you don't regret it, or if you still think he's doing a great job, you've got some problems. You should do some soul searching. And I'm not trying to attack anybody viciously here, but to see someone as corrupt, as venial, as immoral, look up to him, to put him at a pedestal, this is wrong. And it shows the sort of person you are. I think the American people are starting to wake up to that. I think the Russian youth are starting to wake up to the atrocities and the immoralities committed by Putin. And let's hope that Putin gets thrown out of office or gets exterminated or kaputted, as Davidoff says. And let's hope that Trump and his Trumpites get booted out of office. I'm Dr. H. Colonel Polachek, and I bid you TTFN. And let's do this again another day. If you enjoyed it, please share and please like, and we'll see you on another day.